The weight of the diamond on her own finger felt like a lie, a cold, heavy deception pressing into her skin. 7 months pregnant, Isabel Morrow stood in the shadows of the manicured restaurant garden, the soft music and clinking glasses, a world away from the tremor shaking her body. She had come to surprise her husband, to celebrate a new funding round for the company they had built from nothing. But now she was the one surprised. Just 20 feet away, under the soft glow of a paper lantern, her husband Nathaniel Coleman was on one knee. He wasn't practicing a speech. He was holding a velvet box, and the woman before him, her face alight with triumph, was not her. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a replacement. And as the word "yes" drifted across the garden, Isabel felt not just her heart break, but the cold, clear click of a switch deep inside her soul. He had forgotten one thing: she wasn't just his wife. She was the architect of his empire. The life Isabel Morrow and Nathaniel Coleman had built was the stuff of magazine features. Their sprawling minimalist home in the hills overlooking the city was a testament to glass, steel, and success. Every surface was immaculate, every view breathtaking. It was a life curated for envy, and for a long time, Isabel had believed in the curation. They were the golden couple of the tech world. Nate, with his easy charisma and visionary pitches, was the face of their company Innovate Dynamics. He was the sun around which investors, employees, and the media orbited. But Isabel was the gravity, with a mind as sharp as a diamond and a degree in finance and operations. She was the one who had turned Nate's nebulous ideas into a functioning, profitable machine. She was the co-founder, the chief financial officer, the silent, steady hand that signed the checks, negotiated the contracts, and ensured the sun didn't burn out. Their story was their best piece of marketing college sweethearts who coded their first venture in a dusty dorm room fueled by cheap pizza and a shared dream. They had poured their youth, their savings, and every waking hour into Innovate Dynamics, and it had paid off. Now, at 34, Isabel was preparing for their next great venture, a child. The pregnancy had been a long-awaited joy. After 2 years of trying, the positive test had felt like the final perfect piece of their carefully constructed life clicking into place. Nate had been ecstatic, or so she thought. He'd held her, his eyes shining, and whispered, "Now we have everything." But in recent months, a subtle chill had crept into their gilded cage. Nate was more distant, his phone perpetually angled away from her. The late nights at the office became more frequent, justified by the massive Series C funding round they were about to close. "It's the final push, Izzy," he'd say, kissing her forehead. "Once this deal with Vanguard Capital is done, I'm all yours. Ours." Isabel, practical and trusting, had accepted it. She was busy herself working from home, more as the pregnancy advanced, ensuring the company's financials were bulletproof for the due diligence process. She managed the cash flow, the payroll for their 200 employees, and the complex web of shareholder agreements. Her name, alongside Nate's, was on every significant account, a legacy of their early partnership when they were the only two people they could trust. It was a detail that had never seemed important until now. This evening was supposed to be a celebration. Nate had told her he was taking the lead investor from Vanguard Capital, a man named Mr. Peterson, out for a celebratory dinner at the Orangery, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The deal was done. He'd called her an hour ago, his voice buzzing with excitement. "We did it, Izzy. We're officially a unicorn. I wish you were here, but you need to rest. I'll be home late. We'll celebrate properly this weekend." Isabel, feeling a surge of pride and a rare burst of third trimester energy, had decided to surprise him. She wanted to see the look on his face, to share that moment, even for a few minutes. She'd put on a simple but elegant maternity dress, a deep sapphire blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and had her driver take her to the restaurant. She'd slipped in through the side entrance that led to the gardens, planning to ask the maître d' to send a glass of sparkling cider to Nate's table before she revealed herself. But then she saw him. He was at a secluded table on the terrace, bathed in the intimate glow of fairy lights. He wasn't with a grey-haired investor. He was with Jessica Riley. Jessica, the ambitious, raven-haired marketing manager from their office. Isabel had always found her a little too eager, a little too familiar with Nate, but had dismissed it as professional drive. Now, seeing the way Nate looked at her, a look of unguarded adoration he hadn't given Isabel in years, felt like a physical blow. Isabel froze behind a large potted ficus tree, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. She couldn't breathe. It was one thing to suspect, to feel the cold tendrils of doubt. It was another to see it laid bare. She watched as Nate talked his hands, gesturing with that familiar passion. He was selling a dream just like he did with investors, but this time the product was himself. He reached across the table, his hand covering Jessica's. The gesture was so intimate, so proprietary, it made Isabel's stomach clench with a nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She was about to turn to flee before she was seen to retreat to the sterile safety of her car and pretend this night never happened. But then Nate did something that shattered her world completely. He slid out of his chair and knelt on the stone terrace. He pulled a small dark velvet box from his pocket. The sound in Isabel's ears was a deafening roar, like the ocean trying to drown her. It blocked out the soft music, the distant city sounds, everything but the sight of her husband, the father of her unborn child, proposing to another woman. The ring he presented was enormous, a garish, square-cut diamond that flashed under the lights, a vulgar imitation of the elegant vintage ring he'd given her a decade ago. Yes, oh my God, Nate, yes! Jessica's voice, a triumphant squeal, cut through the fog. Isabel didn't move. She couldn't. She watched them kiss a long, possessive embrace. She saw Nate slide the ring onto Jessica's finger. He was replacing her. It wasn't just a sordid affair. It was an erasure. He was building a new life, a new partnership, using the fortune she had helped him build. He was creating a new, perfect story. Something inside Isabel broke. But it wasn't a fragile thing. It was something old and cold and hard. The love, the trust, the shared history, it all shattered, and in its place, a diamond-hard clarity emerged. The shock receded, replaced by an arctic calm. He had made a fatal miscalculation. He had looked at the woman who managed his millions, the woman who held the keys to their kingdom, and had seen only a wife. He saw a pregnant, emotional woman he could easily discard. He had forgotten who she was. Silently, Isabel Moreau backed away. She slipped out of the garden, her movements measured and deliberate. She didn't run. She didn't cry. By the time she reached her car, the plan was already forming in her mind, a cold, precise algorithm of retribution. He wanted to build a new life fine. She would make sure he did it from scratch. The drive home was a silent film. The city lights blurred into streaks of meaningless color. The driver, a kind man named George, who had been with them for years, kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with concern. "Everything all right, Mrs. Coleman?" "Everything is fine, George," Isabel replied, her voice eerily steady. "Just a little tired." The lie tasted like ash, but it was necessary. The performance had begun. She was no longer Isabel Moreau Coleman, the beloved wife. She was an actress playing a part, and she could not afford to break character. Walking into the cavernous empty house was like stepping into a museum of her own failed life. On the wall hung a massive abstract painting they had bought in Paris on their 5th anniversary. On the marble console table, sat a silver frame holding a photo of them on a sailboat, grinning the wind in their hair, looking for all the world like a couple who had won life's lottery. Each object was a testament to a shared past that now felt like a fiction she had foolishly co-authored. She walked past it all up the floating glass staircase and into their master suite. The king-sized bed with its 1,000-thread-count sheets felt like a stage set for a play that had abruptly closed. His scent lingered on the pillows, a faint trace of sandalwood and ambition. With a surge of revulsion, she stripped his pillowcase and threw it into a laundry basket in the corner. She didn't sleep. Instead, she went into her home office, a sleek, organized space that was her true sanctuary. This was where the real power of Innovate Dynamics resided, not in Nate's flashy corner office downtown, but here in her encrypted servers and password-protected files. For hours she sat in the glow of her dual monitors, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. The Arctic calm that had settled over her in the restaurant garden now sharpened into a weapon. The grief was there, a deep, tectonic ache beneath the surface, but she walled it off. Emotion was a liability. Logic was her shield. She began by pulling up the company's foundational documents, the operating agreement, the shareholders' agreement, the bylaws. She had drafted the first versions of these herself late at night in their tiny apartment, long before they could afford lawyers like Robert Chen. She knew every clause, every subsection by heart. Nate, in his arrogance, had always glossed over the legal and financial structures. "You handle the boring stuff, Izzy," he'd say with a charming grin. "Just tell me where to sign." And he had signed. He had signed everything. Her eyes scanned the documents, her mind a blur of efficient analysis. And then she found it. Clause 11.3b, the Key Person and Fiduciary Integrity Clause. It was a piece of legal boilerplate she'd insisted on, including a safeguard against exactly this kind of disaster. It stipulated that in the event of gross fiduciary misconduct by one managing partner, including the demonstrable misuse of company assets for personal affairs that could bring the company into disrepute or expose it to legal risk, the other managing partner was empowered to take unilateral temporary control of all financial assets to protect the interests of the shareholders and the corporation itself. Misuse of company assets. The phrase echoed in her mind. Jessica's salary had been inflated twice in the last year, for no discernible reason. Her travel budget was astronomical trips to marketing conferences in Miami and Santorini that coincided with Nate's own business travel. And the down payment on the new condo Jessica had recently purchased? Isabel had a sickening feeling she knew where that money had come from. This wasn't just an affair. It was theft. He was using their company, her company, as his personal piggy bank to fund his new life. The proposal, the ring, it was all financed by the profits of her labor, her genius. The calm she felt solidified into something harder, colder. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. It was about justice. It was about protecting the legacy she had built and the future of the child sleeping in her womb. She began to work her fingers flying across the keyboard. She opened the secure banking portals for Innovate Dynamics. There were 3 main accounts: the primary operating account at Chase, the investment account, holding the Series B capital at Morgan Stanley, and the payroll account at Bank of America. Her biometric data and a multi-factor authentication code were required for any major administrative changes. Nate had access to view and make transactions, but she held the master keys. It was a structure designed for security, a firewall she had built, never imagining she would use it against him. She systematically logged into each portal. She drafted formal, legally sound notifications to each bank manager, people she knew by name. She cited Clause 11.3b of their legally filed operating agreement. She stated her authority as co-founder, CFO, and managing partner. Her instructions were simple and devastating. Effective 8:00 a.m., the next morning all company accounts were to be frozen. No debits, no transfers, no withdrawals. All access for the signatory Nathaniel Coleman was to be immediately revoked. All transaction authority would revert solely to Isabel Moreau. She attached a digitally signed copy of the operating agreement with the relevant clause highlighted. The final step was the most personal. Their joint personal accounts, their wealth management portfolio. Everything was intertwined, a complex tapestry of shared assets. Untangling it would be a nightmare for the lawyers, but for now, she could paralyze it. She moved a significant sum, exactly half of their liquid personal savings, into a new account she had opened in her maiden name a year ago, on a vague, uneasy instinct. The rest she locked down. As the first grey light of dawn broke over the horizon, Isabel leaned back in her chair. The digital orders were cued, timed to execute at the start of the business day. The Rubicon had been crossed. There was no going back. She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, placing a hand on her belly. The baby kicked a small, reassuring flutter. "It's just us now," she whispered to the sleeping city. "And I will not let him take what is ours." The grief was still there, a monster waiting in the wings. But for now it was held at bay by the cold, exhilarating thrill of action. Nathaniel Coleman was walking into the office this morning, believing he was a king, the master of his universe, a newly engaged man on top of the world. He had no idea he was walking into a kingdom whose gates had just been barred, whose treasury had been sealed, and whose queen was about to declare war. The morning air was crisp and cool as Isabel walked into the downtown headquarters of Innovate Dynamics. It was 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her digital orders would detonate. She wore a tailored black maternity blazer over a simple cream-colored shell, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her face was a mask of placid professionalism, betraying nothing of the maelstrom within. Employees who saw her offered warm, respectful greetings. "Good morning, Mrs. Moreau. Looking radiant today." She was a familiar, if somewhat intimidating figure in the office, the quiet, brilliant force behind the charismatic Mr. Coleman. They saw a woman on the verge of motherhood. They had no idea they were looking at a woman on the brink of war. She ignored her own office and went directly to the accounting department, a glass-enclosed section at the heart of the floor. Brenda, the head of accounting, was already at her desk, nursing a cup of tea. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor who had been with the company since the beginning. Brenda's loyalty was not to Nate or Isabel personally, but to the integrity of the numbers on her spreadsheets. "Brenda," Isabel said, her voice low but firm, "I need you to come with me to the main conference room and bring your master ledger access codes. There's a situation." Brenda's eyes, accustomed to spotting anomalies in financial reports, flickered with curiosity and concern. She saw something in Isabel's gaze, a glint of steel she'd never seen before. Without a word, she grabbed her tablet and followed. Inside the boardroom, Isabel shut the door and activated the privacy screen on the glass walls, turning them an opaque white. The clock on the wall read 7:59 a.m. "Brenda, in approximately 1 minute, all of Innovate Dynamics' corporate accounts will be frozen." Isabel stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "I have revoked Nathaniel's signatory authority and frozen all outgoing financial activity." Brenda's jaw dropped. On what grounds? Isabel payroll is scheduled to go out tomorrow for 212 employees, and we have an 8-figure wire transfer scheduled for the Vanguard capital acquisition of server hardware. "I am aware," Isabel said calmly. I am invoking Clause 11.3b of the operating agreement. I have evidence of gross fiduciary misconduct on Nathaniel's part. For now, all you need to know is that I am taking control to protect the company." The clock ticked over to 8:00 a.m. Isabel's phone buzzed with 3 consecutive emails confirmations from Chase Morgan Stanley and Bank of America. Her orders had been executed. The kingdom was sealed. "Now," Isabel continued, turning to the stunned accountant, "I need your help. I believe Nathaniel has been using company funds to finance a personal relationship with a junior employee, Jessica Riley. I need you to run a full forensic audit on her expense reports, salary history, and any vendor payments associated with her." She slid a piece of paper across the table. On it was the address of Jessica's new condo. "Check for any payments direct or through shell entities related to this property." Brenda stared at Isabel, the pieces clicking into place. She had always wondered about Jessica Riley's exorbitant expense claims, which Nate had always personally approved with a dismissive wave. "I had my suspicions," Brenda admitted, her voice hardening with resolve. "He always said it was for discretionary marketing projects. I'll get right on it." "Good," Isabel said. "No one else is to know the details. As far as anyone is to be told, we are experiencing a temporary administrative issue with our banking partners due to the new funding round. Delay all vendor payments and deflect all inquiries. You report only to me. Is that understood?" "Crystal clear," Brenda replied, her fingers already flying across her tablet. She was a soldier who had just been given her marching orders, and she was fiercely loyal to the chain of command, especially when it was the one who had always ensured the numbers added up. Isabel left Brenda in the boardroom and walked towards Nate's corner office. It had the best view in the building, a panoramic vista of the city she had helped him conquer. She entered his office and walked behind his large mahogany desk. His chair was a throne of black leather and polished chrome. She didn't sit in it. Instead, she stood beside it, waiting. At 9:15 a.m., Nathaniel Coleman strolled into the office. He was a picture of triumph, dressed in a custom suit, a smile playing on his lips. He was radiating the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had it all. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, Izzy," he said, his smile widening as he saw her. "To what do I owe the pleasure of a visit from my beautiful, brilliant, and very pregnant wife?" He set the coffees down on his desk. "I brought you a decaf." The casual affection, the utter hypocrisy of it, sent a shard of ice through Isabel's veins. "We need to talk, Nate," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. His smile faltered slightly. "Okay, everything all right? You look serious. Is it the baby?" "The baby is fine," she said. "The company, however, is not." He laughed, a confident, dismissive sound. "What are you talking about? We just closed the Vanguard deal. We're on top of the world." "Try to access that world, Nate," she suggested, gesturing to his computer. "Try to pay for something. Try to wire money to a supplier. Try to do anything." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He sat down in his throne, waving a hand. "Izzy, I don't have time for games. I have a press release to approve." "Just try," she insisted. With an exasperated sigh, he logged into the company's primary banking portal. He navigated to the wire transfer page, typed in a dummy amount of $100 to a test vendor, and hit enter. A red banner appeared at the top of the screen. "Access denied. User privileges revoked. Contact primary administrator." Nate stared at the screen. He blinked, then tried again. The same red banner appeared. A knot of confusion and anger began to form on his brow. He quickly toggled to the other accounts. All of them flashed the same message. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, looking up at her. "Did the bank screw something up? Is this a glitch from the Vanguard deposit?" It's not a glitch. Nathaniel. Isabel said, her voice as cold and clear as glass. I did it. He stared at her, his mind refusing to process her words. You did what? What are you talking about? I froze the accounts, she explained patiently, as if to a child. All of them. The operating funds, the investment capital, the payroll account. I revoked your access. As of 8:00 a.m. this morning, you cannot spend a single dollar of this company's money. The color drained from his face. He looked from his computer screen. To her, his expression, a mixture of utter disbelief and dawning fury. You're joking. This is some kind of sick joke. Why? Isabel allowed herself a small, mirthless smile. She walked to the window looking out over the city. I went to the orangery last night, Nate. I wanted to surprise you, to celebrate with you. She turned back to face him, her eyes locking onto his. And I was the one who was surprised. It was a lovely proposal. The ring is a little flashy for my taste, but I'm sure Jessica likes it. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, pale shock. He looked like he had been physically struck. Izzy, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. She cut him off, her voice dropping to a near whisper laced with venom. You're replacing me. You're building a new life with a younger model, and you're using the money I helped you make to do it. You thought you could just discard me, the pregnant wife, like some outdated piece of software. You underestimated me. He shot to his feet, his face contorting with rage. You can't do this. This is my company. You'll destroy us. No, Nate. She corrected him, taking a step towards the desk, her presence suddenly immense, dominant. This is our company, and I am simply protecting my 50% stake. You can't destroy what you no longer control. The king was off his throne, but the queen was in the room, and she had just declared checkmate. Nate's world, which had been a symphony of success only minutes before, devolved into a cacophony of chaos. His first instinct was denial, followed by pure, unadulterated rage. You're insane! He roared, slamming his hand on the polished mahogany desk. The 2 coffee cups jumped, sloshing brown liquid onto a stack of papers. This is illegal. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I already have, Isabel replied, coolly, not flinching. I spoke with Robert Chen this morning. He seemed to think my actions taken to protect the company from a CEO engaging in gross, fiduciary misconduct were perfectly justifiable under Clause 11.3b, a clause, I might add, that you signed without reading. The mention of Robert, their lawyer, the man who had structured their wills and celebrated their every milestone, was a low blow that hit its mark. Nate's face went from red to a blotchy white. He was being outmaneuvered at every turn. His phone began to ring, a shrill, incessant sound that sliced through the tension in the room. He glanced at the caller ID, David Foster, their chief operating officer and Nate's closest friend. He ignored it. Unlock the accounts, Isabel. Now, he commanded, his voice a low growl. He was trying to reassert his authority, to put her back in her place. No, she said simply. The phone rang again. Then his desk line began to chirp. An urgent email notification popped up on his screen. Subject: urgent wire failure. Vanguard hardware. You don't understand what you've done, he hissed, his voice cracking with a new note of desperation. The Vanguard deal requires us to purchase $10 million in new server infrastructure by Friday. The purchase order is due today. If we miss that payment, we're in breach of contract. They could pull the entire funding round. I'm aware of the deadline, Isabel said, her composure unshakable. And it's a shame your new fiancé's 5-carat diamond ring can't be liquidated to cover the cost. The cruelty of her remark hung in the air. He stared at her, seeing, for the first time, not his compliant, supportive wife, but a stranger, a formidable, ruthless opponent who knew all his weaknesses. David Foster burst into the office, his face pale with panic, not even bothering to knock. "Nate, the banks aren't responding. They're saying our accounts are frozen. The finance department is in an uproar. What the hell is going on?" David, a steady, methodical man, looked from Nate's furious face to Isabel's serene one. He could feel the Arctic temperature in the room. He had known them both for 15 years. He'd been a groomsman at their wedding. "Isabel, do you know anything about this?" David asked, his tone pleading. "She did it," Nate spat, pointing a trembling finger at her. "She's lost her mind. She's sabotaging the company." "I'm not sabotaging it." "David," Isabel corrected, her voice even and reasonable, "I'm protecting it. Nate has been misappropriating company funds. I've taken temporary control of the finances until the board can be convened to address the issue." David looked utterly bewildered. "Misappropriating funds? Nate, what is she talking about?" Nate's jaw tightened. He couldn't admit the truth in front of his COO. "She's making things up. It's a personal matter. When you use company money to buy your mistress a condo and a diamond ring, it ceases to be a personal matter. Nathaniel," Isabel said, her voice cutting through his defense, "it becomes a shareholder issue." David Foster flinched as if he'd been slapped. He stared at Nate, whose guilty silence was more damning than any confession. The office rumors, the late nights, Jessica Riley's sudden promotion, it all coalesced into a sordid, ugly picture. The intercom on Nate's desk buzzed. It was his executive assistant. "Mr. Coleman, Mr. Peterson from Vanguard Capital is on line 1. He sounds unhappy." Nate's eyes widened in terror. The architect of their biggest triumph was on the phone, and the kingdom was in flames. "Tell him I'll call him back," he choked out. "He says it's not a request," the assistant's tinny voice replied. As Nate scrambled for the phone, Isabel turned to leave. Her work here was done. She had lit the fuse. Now she would watch the explosion from a safe distance. "You're not going anywhere," Nate yelled, lunging toward her and grabbing her arm. Isabel stopped dead. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Her eyes filled with a terrifyingly calm fury. "Let go of me, Nate. Now." David stepped forward instinctively. "Nate, for God's sake, let her go. She's pregnant." The reminder seemed to momentarily break through his rage. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. The moment of physical aggression had been a mistake, a crack in his charismatic facade that revealed the desperate, ugly creature beneath. He had crossed a line, and all three of them knew it. Isabel smoothed the sleeve of her blazer, her movements precise and deliberate. She gave David a brief, almost imperceptible nod. "David, please try to contain the operational fallout. Assure the department heads that this is a temporary administrative measure. No one is losing their jobs. Payroll will be met. I will see to it." She then turned her gaze back to her husband, who was now slumped against his desk, the phone receiver held loosely in his hand, Mr. Peterson's angry voice, audible even from a distance. "You had a kingdom, Nate," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of finality. "A beautiful, thriving kingdom, and you were willing to burn it all down for a trinket. Now you get to live in the ashes." She walked out of the office, closing the door gently behind her. The sound of shouting erupted from within. Nate finally taking the call, trying to explain the inexplicable, the sound of his empire beginning to crumble. Isabel didn't look back. She walked through the chaotic office, a serene island in a sea of panic, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The first battle was won. The fallout from Isabel's financial coup was swift and brutal. Innovate Dynamics. A company that prided itself on seamless efficiency and forward momentum ground to a screeching halt. The news of the frozen accounts ripped through the office like a shockwave, spawning whispers and rumors in every corner. Was the company bankrupt? Was the Vanguard deal a sham? Nate was trapped in a vortex of his own making. He spent the day oscillating between rage-fueled calls to his new pit bull of a lawyer and pathetic pleading voicemails left on Isabel's phone. "Izzy, please call me back. We can talk about this. Don't do this to us, to our legacy. You bitch. You think you can get away with this? I will sue you into the ground. I will take everything. Isabel, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But don't punish the company. Don't punish our employees for what I did." Isabel listened to each message with the detached interest of a scientist studying a specimen. She didn't reply. She was at home coordinating with Robert Chen and Brenda. The audit was already yielding fruit. Brenda, unleashed and armed with Isabel's authority, was a forensic whirlwind. She uncovered a pattern of deliberate deception. Jessica Riley's expense reports were a work of fiction. 5-star hotels billed as conference venues. Michelin star restaurant receipts submitted as client entertainment. Thousands of dollars in marketing supplies from luxury brands like Chanel and Cartier. Each one had Nate's digital signature of approval. But the smoking gun was bigger than that. Brenda discovered a shell corporation, Riley Creative Solutions LLC, set up 6 months prior. The sole proprietor was Jessica Riley. Innovate Dynamics had paid this consulting firm over $450,000 for brand strategy services. There were no contracts, no deliverables, no records of any work ever being performed. It was a slush fund, a direct and brazen siphoning of company capital. A portion of that money, Brenda confirmed through property records, had gone directly toward the down payment on Jessica's new condo. "It's embezzlement, plain and simple," Robert Chen stated grimly over a conference call with Isabel and Brenda. "This goes beyond a marital dispute. This is a criminal offense. Nate has exposed the company to immense legal and financial risk. Your invocation of Clause 11.3b is not just justified. It was necessary." Meanwhile, Nate's attempts to fight back were failing. His lawyer filed for an emergency injunction to have the accounts unfrozen, but the court wouldn't hear it for at least 48 hours. When they did, Robert Chen would be ready with a mountain of evidence showing Nate as a rogue CEO who had been stopped from bleeding the company dry. That evening, Isabel was in the nursery, calmly assembling a crib when she heard the front door slam open. She didn't need to look to know it was Nate. He had used his key, an act of defiant ownership. His footsteps thundered up the stairs. He appeared in the doorway of the nursery, his face pale and haggard, his suit rumpled. He looked utterly defeated, and it made him dangerous. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. He gestured around the serene light grey room with its half-assembled crib and stack of baby clothes. "You're trying to build this perfect little nest while you set fire to my entire life." Isabel continued to methodically screw a bolt into the crib frame. "This is my life too, Nate. This is my child's future. You were the one holding the match. This is about us, about my mistake. You punish me, not the company." He pleaded his anger, giving way to a desperate whine. "David is getting calls from board members. Our stock options are going to be worthless. People are going to quit. You've started a run on the bank." "I've stopped a thief from emptying the vault," she corrected him, calmly, finally looking up. Her eyes were cold. "Tell me, Nate, how much was the consulting fee for Riley Creative Solutions?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his face a mask of guilty horror. He had thought his tracks were covered. He had underestimated Brenda. He had underestimated Isabel. That was a legitimate business expense. He stammered the lie, weak and transparent. Was the ring a legitimate expense, too? Isabel asked, her voice dripping with contempt. Or the down payment on her apartment. You weren't just cheating on me, Nate. You were stealing from me. You were stealing from David, from Brenda, from every single employee who trusts us with their livelihood. You did this. He stared at her speechless. All his bluster, his charm, his threats, they were useless against the cold, hard weight of the facts. He was cornered, exposed, and he had no one to blame but himself. What do you want, Izzy? He finally whispered, his voice broken. What's your price to make this stop? Half? Do you want half of everything? Isabel stood up slowly, her pregnant belly a proud, defiant shield. She walked towards him until she was standing just a few feet away, forcing him to look at the life he had so casually betrayed. Half, she repeated, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. Oh, Nate, you still don't get it. You seem to be under the impression that you're still in a position to negotiate. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. I don't want half. I want it all. I want your shares. I want your resignation. I want you to walk away from Innovate Dynamics with nothing but the clothes on your back. And in return, I will consider not filing criminal charges for embezzlement. This was her endgame. Not just divorce, not just financial separation, but complete and total erasure. He had tried to replace her in his life. She would remove him from theirs. Nate's face was a study in devastation. The company was his identity, his creation, his entire world. The thought of losing it was worse than any divorce settlement. It was an annihilation of his very being. You can't, he breathed. You wouldn't. Try me, Isabel said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. You have 24 hours to accept my offer. After that, this all goes public. The affair, the theft, everything. The board will fire you. The investors will sue you, and the district attorney will prosecute you. Your choice, Nathaniel. She turned her back on him, then, returning to the crib, a symbol of the future she was now building alone. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, a ghost in his own home, before turning and walking away, the sound of his defeat echoing in the silent, cavernous house. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in corporate warfare. While Nate was paralyzed by indecision and the dawning horror of his predicament, Isabel was consolidating her power. She knew that winning this fight required more than just financial control. It required narrative control. Her first call was to the board of directors. She scheduled an emergency virtual meeting for the following morning, giving them only the barest of details. A critical governance issue regarding the CEO has arisen, which requires your immediate attention. The cryptic message sent a ripple of alarm through the 4 board members, a mix of seasoned venture capitalists and industry veterans. Her most important call, however, was to David Foster. She asked him to meet her at a neutral location, a small independent coffee shop miles away from the office. She needed to know where his loyalty lay. David arrived looking like he hadn't slept in days. He slid into the booth opposite her, his face etched with anxiety. Isabel, this is a nightmare. The whole company is on the verge of implosion. You have to undo this. Isabel took a slow sip of her chamomile tea before speaking. David, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to think not as Nate's friend, but as the COO of Innovate Dynamics. If you discovered that a senior executive was creating shell companies to funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the company to pay for a lavish lifestyle with a junior employee, what would you do? David's jaw tightened. He knew the answer. It was the answer any responsible executive would give. I would suspend them immediately and launch a full investigation. If the allegations were true, I would fire them and report it to the board. Exactly, Isabel said. She pushed a slim folder across the table. It contained the preliminary findings from Brenda's audit, the incorporation documents for Riley Creative Solutions, the invoices, the wire transfers, and the property records for Jessica's condo. David opened the folder and began to read. The color drained from his face. He had suspected an affair a lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, sustained pattern of fraud. It was a betrayal, not just of Isabel, but of him, of their team, of everything they had worked for. I had no idea, he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. I can't believe he would be so stupid, so reckless. He wasn't just reckless, David. He was arrogant, Isabel said. He believed he was untouchable. He believed we were all just supporting characters in his story. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. I have the votes to force his resignation, but it will be messy. It will leak to the press. The story will be Founders Feud Destroys Tech Unicorn. But if the COO stands with the CFO, if the operational and financial heads of the company present a united front, the narrative changes. The story becomes leadership team acts decisively to remove corrupt CEO and save company. Which story do you want to be a part of? It was a stark choice, loyalty to a friend who had proven himself a liability and a thief, or loyalty to the company and the 200 employees whose futures were on the line. For David, a man defined by his integrity, it wasn't really a choice at all. What do you need me to do? He asked, his voice firm with newfound resolve. While Isabel was securing her key ally, Nate was discovering the fragility of his own support system. His first panicked call was to Jessica. He met her at her new condo, the one his theft had helped buy. He found her not in a state of supportive concern, but of frantic panic. "They've suspended my corporate accounts," she cried, pacing the expensive hardwood floors. "My company credit card was declined at lunch." "What is going on, Nate? People are saying the company is broke." Nate explained the situation, that Isabel knew everything, that she had frozen the accounts. He expected sympathy, a promise to stand by him. Instead, he saw raw, naked fear in her eyes. "She knows about the money," Jessica asked, her voice barely a whisper. About the consulting firm." "She knows everything," Nate admitted miserably. Jessica stared at him, the adoration from the proposal dinner completely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating terror. "You told me it was a bonus, a discretionary fund you were entitled to." "It was complicated," Nate mumbled. "You mean you lied?" She shot back, her voice turning shrill. "You lied to me and you used me. My name is on that company, Nate. I could go to jail." The conversation devolved quickly. Jessica wasn't his partner in crime. She was a co-conspirator who was realizing she was about to be left holding the bag. She saw her future, the career, the status, the wealth evaporating before her eyes. And she saw him not as her white knight, but as the man who had led her to the gallows. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I need to call a lawyer." "Get out." He left her apartment stunned. The woman he had intended to build a new life with had just thrown him to the wolves to save herself. His friends, his lover, his COO, his entire support network was crumbling, revealing the rotten foundation of his own character. He was truly, utterly alone. That night, Nate sat in a soulless hotel room, the ultimatum from Isabel ticking away like a bomb. His lawyer had confirmed his worst fears. Isabel's evidence was overwhelming. He could fight, but it would be a public, humiliating crucifixion that would end with him not only losing the company, but likely facing a criminal trial. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Isabel. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m. You can attend and be publicly terminated, or you can have a signed resignation and share transfer agreement on my lawyer's desk by 8 a.m. Your call." The cold finality of it broke him. He was checked, mated, and utterly destroyed. The king had been toppled. There was no one left to fight for him. With a shaking hand, he called his lawyer. "Draw up the papers," he said, his voice a dead monotone. "She wins." The 9 a.m. board meeting was less of a battle and more of a coronation. At 8:05 a.m., a bike messenger had delivered a thick legal envelope to Robert Chen's office. It contained Nate Coleman's signed unconditional resignation as CEO and chairman of Innovate Dynamics, effective immediately. It also included a signed agreement transferring his entire 50% equity stake in the company to Isabel Moreau. In exchange for this, a single clause stated that Isabel would not pursue private legal action related to the misappropriation of funds, though it carefully made no promises regarding any potential action by the district attorney. When Isabel Robert and David Foster logged into the video conference, the 4 board members were visibly tense, expecting a bloodbath. Isabel began, her voice calm and authoritative. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining on such short notice. I'll get straight to the point. As of this morning, Nathaniel Coleman has resigned from his positions as CEO and chairman and has divested his entire stake in the company. I am now the sole majority shareholder." A stunned silence filled the virtual room. One of the board members, a seasoned venture capitalist named Michael Pierce, finally spoke. "Isabel, what the hell happened? We have a $10 million wire that's been blocked and a CEO who has just vanished." "Nate did not vanish. He was removed," Isabel stated plainly. She didn't share the sordid details of the affair. She didn't need to. She framed it purely in terms of corporate governance and fiduciary duty. It came to my attention that Nathaniel had engaged in a series of financial actions that constituted gross misconduct and put the company at significant risk. He was operating without board oversight and misappropriating funds for non-business purposes. When confronted with the evidence, he chose to resign. David Foster then spoke, his voice lending institutional weight to her words. "I have reviewed the evidence Isabel uncovered. Her assessment is correct. Her actions in freezing the accounts, while drastic, were necessary to prevent further damage to the company's financial standing and to protect shareholder assets. It was a perfectly executed maneuver. The 2 senior-most executives were in lockstep. They had identified a problem, neutralized the threat, and were presenting a united front. This wasn't a messy divorce. This was a corporate cleansing." Michael Pierce leaned back, stroking his chin. He was a pragmatist. He cared less about Nate's personal failings and more about the stability of his investment. "So where does this leave us? We're a ship without a captain." "No." Isabel said, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You're a ship that just threw its reckless captain overboard. I am the co-founder of this company. I built its financial and operational infrastructure from the ground up. I know every team, every product, every line of code, and every dollar in our accounts. I am asking the board to appoint me as interim CEO." There was a moment of hesitation. Isabel was a known quantity brilliant, but she had always been behind the scenes. Nate had been the visionary, the salesman. "With all due respect, Isabel, you've been the CFO," another board member argued. "You don't have experience as a public-facing CEO." "For the past 5 years, Nate's primary role has been to tell a story that I made true." Isabel countered, her voice sharp with confidence. "He sold the dream. I built the reality. I can assure you I am more than capable of steering this company through the transition. David has agreed to stay on as COO, ensuring operational continuity. And the first thing I will do as CEO is unfreeze the accounts and execute the Vanguard wire transfer. We will be back on track by lunchtime. Her confidence was infectious. She wasn't asking for permission. She was informing them of the new reality. She had the evidence, she had the COO's support, and most importantly, she now had 100% of the founding shares. They could either support her or face a protracted battle with a new majority owner who held all the cards. Michael Pierce smiled faintly. He recognized a winner when he saw one. All in favor of appointing Isabel Moreau as interim CEO of Innovate Dynamics. One by one, 4 hands went up on the screen. It was unanimous. "Thank you," Isabel said, a single decisive nod. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." She ended the call. The transfer of power was complete. Her first act as CEO was to authorize the Vanguard payment, stabilizing their most critical new partnership. Her second was to call an all-hands meeting. She stood before her employees, not in the main auditorium, but in the central atrium of the office, creating a sense of intimacy and directness. Her pregnancy was not a vulnerability, but a symbol of creation, of future building. As many of you know, there has been some uncertainty over the past day. She began, her voice ringing with clarity. I'm here to provide that certainty. Nathaniel Coleman has resigned from the company to pursue other opportunities. The board has appointed me as your new CEO. Our mission has not changed. Our funding is secure, and payroll will be processed on schedule tomorrow. She then did something Nate would never have done. She was honest. We have just navigated a serious internal crisis, but this company is not about one person. It's about all of us. It's about the brilliant work you all do every day. My door is open. My commitment is to you and to the incredible future we are going to build together. A wave of relief washed through the crowd, followed by a spontaneous burst of applause. They weren't just clapping for the stability, they were clapping for her, for the quiet, brilliant woman who had finally stepped out of the shadows and taken her rightful place at the helm. Her final piece of business was a single email sent from her new CEO account to the head of human resources. Subject termination. Please process the immediate termination of employment for Jessica Riley for gross violation of the company's code of conduct. Ensure her access to all company property and systems is revoked immediately. She hit send without a moment's hesitation. The Queen had cleaned her castle. 3 months later, the Arctic fury that had fueled Isabel Moreau was gone, replaced by the profound, quiet warmth of her 1-week-old daughter Olivia sleeping in her arms. The sprawling house was now a home, reclaimed and filled with a peaceful new energy. Under her command, Innovate Dynamics hadn't just stabilized, it had soared. Freed from Nate's ego and anchored by Isabel's strategic, transparent leadership, the company was more focused and profitable than ever. The employees were energized, the board was confident, and their investors, impressed by her decisive action, had doubled down on their commitment. Isabel Moreau wasn't just the interim CEO anymore. She was the company's undeniable future. Nate was a ghost. Having signed away his empire for the promise of her silence on his criminal fraud, he had vanished, his reputation in the industry irrevocably shattered. Jessica Riley had faded into similar obscurity. Fired and unemployable, a cautionary tale of ambition and greed. They were footnotes in a story Isabel was no longer reading. As Isabel looked down at Olivia's peaceful face, she felt a final, powerful clarity. She had been forced to tear down the flawed structure of her marriage, to save the foundation, beneath only to discover that the foundation had been hers alone, all along. The heavy diamond on her finger was a distant memory replaced by the priceless living weight of her daughter in her arms, a future built not from the ashes of a broken promise, but on the bedrock of her own unbreakable strength. The story of Isabel Moreau isn't just about infidelity. It's a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can often unlock our greatest strengths. She transformed her pain not into petty revenge, but into a strategic reclamation of her life, her company, and her future. It's a testament to the quiet power that resides in those who are underestimated, and a story of how a woman on the brink of losing everything found the strength to take it all. What would you have done in her position could you turn heartbreak into a boardroom coup? Her journey from a betrayed wife to a commanding CEO shows that sometimes the only way to rebuild your world is to first be willing to burn down the parts that are holding you back. If this story of strength, justice, and empowerment resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. For more gripping stories of life's dramatic twists and turns, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like Isabel's to light. Thank you for listening.